Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bridge Talks. So, hi, Weber.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Welcome to the Bridge Talks.
Thank you.
Great to
Thank you
have
for
you
the
here.
invitation.
Great. And so today we are joined by Weber Takaki from Consecutivus. And he's going to talk about this very interesting concept of existential seriality. So I'll just introduce a little bit about Weber, and then he can take it from there. So Weber was born in Brasilia, in Brazil. He currently works as an IT analyst and researcher. He has a master's degree in electrical engineering and computing and a doctor's degree in medicine. And he has been volunteering in conscientiology since 2000. And he is co-author of the book Penta, Lucid Interdimensional Assistance, currently in Portuguese, and translated the book Consciousness in Revolution by Rosemary Salis. So, Weber, I'm going to leave it to you and see you later.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Also a challenge to be speaking to you in English. I will do my best to be as clear as possible and to share some ideas. The idea here is not to give a class or something like that, but exchange experiences and exchange thoughts and ideas regarding this topic that we have today, which is the existential seriality. So to start off, I would like to bring to you a principle that is very important in conscientiology that we try to apply in every aspect of our research and of our studies, which is the principle of disbelief. And this principle says the following: don't believe in anything, not even in what you hear during this talk. Experiment. Have your own personal experiences. Well, the idea here is not to be in that position of not believing in anything, but to criticize, to analyze everything that we talk here, that we speak here in a critical manner, at the same time open to new ideas, but at the same time with your criticism and your critical analysis of what is being spoken here. Okay, so the idea here is to have a discussion, to have a debate on the topic, and not actually just bring some absolute truths here. So I try to organize the ideas, this presentation in a questions and answer form, questions and answer way of organizing the topics. We'll first going to define what is existential seriality. Then we're gonna make some discussions about can existential seriality be proven. These ideas, these questions were questions that I made myself in the very beginning when I started to study conscientiology. And we're going to be able to share some ideas on this in this relation to related to the proofs that can be offered for the existential seriality effect. Why to study the existential seriality? What are the benefits? What are the advantages? What are the drawbacks and disadvantages or risks regarding the study of existential seriality? And what are the tools available for investigating existential seriality from the perspective of conscientiology? Okay, we are going to try to answer these questions, and we're going to try to follow this agenda. Okay, feel free to make notes, and we're going to have some time at the end of this presentation to interact and to answer questions. So What is existential seriality? I took this definition, which is the basic definition that we use in conscientiology, from one of the treatises of the, proposed and written and published by Professor Valdo Vieira, which is the Xology treatise. And on page 921, it says that the existential series is the condition of continuous alternation of one period of life after the soma being the deactivation of the soma, of the physical body, and one period of the life after rhizoma, which is the rebirth of the soma or reactivation of a new physical body, comprising the incessant evolutionary itinerary of the consciousness until it frees itself from the compulsory cycle of intraphysical rebirths. We can split this definition in two parts, just to make it more clear. And if we read the definition from the beginning and until after rhizoma, we're going to have the first and most important part of this definition. So I'll reread this again. The condition of continuous alternation of one period of life after rhizoma, which means the life after this physical life or the extra-physical life, and one period of life after rhizoma. If we move forward to the next slide, there is a graphical representation of this cycle, which is called the multi-existential cycle. If you can skip to the next slide, please. Yes. So we're going to have, if we think of one period of intraphysical life and one period of extraphysical life, we're going to see this cycle in the left part of the slide. This is the whole cycle of our life, of intraphysical and extraphysical life, and one period, one cycle is called a multi-existential cycle. So we have the intraphysical period, which is this life that we have in the intraphysical world. After we go through the process of the soma or deactivation of our soma, which is also also known as physical death, or the death of our body, of our biological body. We move to the extraphysical period. We switch to an extraphysical life. We still have our same attributes. We are the same consciousness, but we don't have the physical body anymore. Okay, and then after that, we can again reactivate or regain a new soma, a new physical body through the process of rhizoma. And then we start again another intraphysical period. So if you take one period intraphysical and one intraphysical period and one is extraphysical period, then we have a multi-existential cycle. And if we plot and if we draw these cycles along the timeline, we're going to see it's represented here in the graph of the right side of the slide. It's represented in the form of a signal. So in the upper part of the timeline we represented, of course, the extraphysical life, the extraphysical period, and in the bottom part of the timeline, we have the intraphysical period. So our extraphysical, our existential seriality is composed of a series of multi-existential cycles. Okay, so this is basically a graphical representation of the definition that we had in that we read a little bit earlier. Okay, so this condition of continuous alternation of one period of life after the soma, which is the extraphysical period, and one period of life after rhizoma, which is the intraphysical period. The second part of the definition says that this condition of continuous alternation comprises the incessant evolutionary itinerary of the consciousness until it frees itself from the compulsory cycle of intraphysical rebirths. This is one idea, one hypothesis, that eventually all of us will reach some evolutionary status or evolutionary point that this continuous cycle of rebirths in the intraphysical world won't be necessary anymore. So we may switch to a different existential seriality, to a different kind of multi-existential cycle that does not include the intraphysical period, but includes eventually different worlds, different dimensions. Okay, so this is the idea of existential seriality or existential series. All of us, from the perspective of conscientiology, have lived before in the extraphysical and the extraphysical dimensions, and we carry all the experiences of these past experiences, these past lives and past periods in our hollow memory. And we are actually today I would say, the result of all the experiences that we had in past lives and in this intraphysical life. Okay, so basically this is the definition of existential seriality. We can say existential series, and we also can talk about studying existential seriality, the specialty of conscientiology that studies existential seriality is Xology. That's the name for the specialty that the subtopic, the subspecialty in conscientiology that is related, that is dedicated to studying the existential seriality. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, next. Here I just show one multi-existential cycle in the graph in the timeline. Okay, but if we move forward, I think we're gonna see here the representation of the whole, not the whole, but one, of course, one part of the whole existential seriality that we have. So this array of multi-existential cycles along the timeline, that this is what composes our existential seriality. So can existential seriality be proven? That's one question that it's very common. Actually, I myself made this question in the very beginning when I started to study conscientiology and to study this kind of topic. And there are two answers for this question: yes and no. But first, let's just start with the definition of proof. If you can move forward to the next slide, please. Here, yes. So the definition of proof. I took this definition from the dictionary. Okay. So a proof are facts, evidence, argument, etc., establishing or helping to establish a fact. And if we take a more philosophical definition of proof, then in logic, it is a demonstration of the validity of a proposition according to given logical principles and deductive rules. So, if we think of the scientific and academic definition and the requirements for establishing a proof in the scientific with a scientific approach, with the standard science approach, then existential seriality cannot actually be proven because, first of all, we don't have, not today, okay? Nowadays, we don't have enough tools, enough technology to prove existential seriality. And there are two principles in the philosophical aspects of the science that need to be fulfilled in order to a statement to be considered a proof or real or the truth. Okay, and one of the of the principles is the principle of universality. So if we take a phenomenon like, for instance, reincarnation or rhizoma, or other phenomena that we study in conscientiology, like experience out of the body, out of the body experience, and parapsychic intuition or parapsychic experiences. All these phenomena, they're very complex and very hard to fulfill this universality principle. The universality principle states that a phenomenon needs to be universal. But parapsychic experiences are not very common. I mean, although it is common, we cannot say it's universal because not all the population in the world has this experience or this had already parapsychic experiences. And the second principle, and it's a little bit related to the universality principle, is the principle of reproducibility. So if we take an experiment related to existential seriality, it has to be, if we keep the same variables, same conditions, it has to be reproducible by anyone interested in investigating the same phenomenon. And this is also a problem with parapsychic experiments and experiences, because reproducibility is really a challenge. So I can have one experience that is self-proving, self-persuasive, and but I cannot say that this experience, anyone that tries the same experiment will achieve the same results, because it's very subjective, and there are many variables that are hard to control in this whole process. So if we take this approach, we won't be able to prove existential seriality. But there were investigators, researchers, and scholars in the past that tried to prove, and actually they made a very good job in finding enough evidence of the existential seriality. And in conscientiology, we take the existential seriality as a principle. So we're not really interested in proving this, but we take it as as something that is true. It has some logic behind it. First of all, we will spend a lot of time trying to prove something that is very hard to prove. So we are more interested in focusing on the consequences of this. And in another principle that we apply in conscientiology, which is also a very important principle, which is the principle of self-research. If I say, well, dreaming is something, it's real, I cannot prove that it's real, because no one ever photographed or filmed or recorded a dream. But since it's a universal phenomenon, we don't really have to prove that it exists. We're just trying science today, and in the past, we're just trying to understand how dream is processed and what dreams represent for ourselves. But we don't really need to prove, because everybody dreams. So it's a universal phenomenon, even though it's hard to prove, even though no one has ever recorded a dream. We all take it for granted. We all take it as the truth. So we're more interested in finding ways to experiment the phenomenon. And once we experiment, it's really self-persuasive, it's a self-proof. And even though when someone else can say it was not true, we lived it, we experienced it. So it's like dreaming. anyone can tell me, well, you didn't dream, but I experienced it. So it's really impossible for anyone else to delete this idea of I having dreamed of something just by saying. So these are the principles that the ideas behind the consciential paradigm. First, we take the existential seriality as an axiom, or something that we were not really interested in proving. It was already proven before, but we're interested in what the consequences of this existential seriality in our daily life and in our evolutionary process. So this is much more important than proving that existential seriality is or is not real. And we can achieve this this proof by ourselves experimenting and having our own experiences. So this is related to the principle of disbelief that we just talked in the beginning. But I would also like to share with you some important researchers that did this effort in proving or offering evidence that existential seriality is real in the past. And if we can move to the next slide, yes, I can mention William Crookes. He was a scientific person, a man of science. That researched extra-physical and parapsychic phenomena, and he wrote a book, the most important book that he wrote. He wrote a lot, but in this topic was Phenomena of Spiritualism. In Portuguese, it's translated to Fatos Espíritas, or spiritual facts. So he was one important science man that did this effort to prove. He was actually not trying to prove the reincarnation or the rebirth process or the multi-existentiality process, but he was trying to prove something which is necessary or needed to prove, the multi-existentiality, which is the survival of the consciousness after the physical body's death. Okay, so he was trying to prove that the spirits were actually living, and they were actually able to interfere or to interact with the intraphysical beings. Of course, that if you search in the internet for this science man, William Crookes, you'll find different opinions about his works. It's very controversial, but I think that it's an important reference for us. Another person that did a very good job was Frederick Myers. He was one of the founders of the London Society for Psychical Research. He wrote this book, Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. He collected a number of accounts of parapsychic phenomena, and he wrote this book giving numbers of evidences that consciousnesses after the death of the body will remain living, of course, with in a different dimension, but actually being the same consciousnesses. And another approach that was given by Ernesto Bozzano in Italy, he wrote this book, Apparitions of Deceased Person at Deathbed, because this is one of the phenomena that was studied by the spiritualists in that period. Was a phenomena of people that were in the near death. Okay, so this is why the title of the book is Apparitions of Deceased Persons at Deathbeds. So it's a very, I would say it's quite common phenomenon that when a person that is, for instance, in the deathbed, really close to the soma, they report that they are seeing already deceased persons and deceased relatives most of the times. If we start talking with our family and the elders of our families, you'll probably find accounts of this kind of phenomenon. So Ernesto Bolzano, what he did was he investigated and reported this kind of research, this kind of phenomenon. So it's another important account of the survival of the consciousness of the bodily death. And specific to in the topic of existential seriality, I think that the most important works are from Ian Stevenson and his colleagues and partners in this investigation. One of the first books that he wrote was 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. He studied mainly reports and accounts of children that reported being the reincarnation of previous persons. So it's a very solid work, very robust work of investigation, and he actually continued this work through Jim Tucker, which was one of the researchers that worked with him. He's also a reference in this topic of reincarnation. So these are one of the most important authors and works that I could bring to you. Of course, they are not the only ones, but they are important references for us. And we understand that this is, and these, and of course other works are enough proof, enough evidence that the consciousness continues after the death of the body, and eventually we all regain or reactivate a new body, a new soma. Okay. So if we can move forward to the next slide, multi-existentially is a foundation of the consciential paradigm, as I mentioned before, and conscientiology is not concerned in proving the existential seriality, because we understand that the evidence that was necessary, that was needed, was already given by these researchers. And we are more concerned in offering tools for achieving self-proving or self-persuasive experiences. This is more important than proving to the whole world. It's to prove to ourselves. Of course, that if we collect a number of researchers and persons and people that have these experiences, and if we take them as a whole, of course, it's naturally can be considered important and solid evidence that it's real. Okay. So why study existential seriality? So we just stated here that we're not interested in proving, even though we're not concerned of proving, of course, that any proof that can be offered if it's interesting. We're interested in any proof. Of course, it's interesting. But why to study existential seriality? So if we can move to the next slide. Okay. I took this idea from the same book, from Xology. It's probably one of the most important aspects of studying existential seriality. So the knowledge, or better still, the acceptance of the theory of successive intraphysical lives, besides bringing profound implications for human beings, alters their general philosophy and eliminates all racial prejudice, nationalist passion, and sexual chauvinism. So it makes any kind of prejudice really nonsensical. Because if we think that in the past we could have been women or black or white or yellow, it doesn't matter, because we may all have experiences like these as different nationalities, different genders. So we all have this in our past, in our history. So it makes no sense actually to have any kind of prejudice of this kind. But this is not the only reason we should study existential seriality. First of all, and if we move to the next slide, I'll give some other ideas. We can acquire and improve self-knowledge. We can understand more who we are, what we are doing today, here, with our lives. We can guide our evolutionary efforts. This is very important because if you know who we are, if you know our itinerary from the past until today, we can better guide, our next steps. We can find or adjust our existential target group. We understand that we are not here in a vacation, in this life on a vacation. We are here to be happy, to have vacation times, but also to make an important work regarding our existential target group. We can also bring evolutionary priority actions forward. Maybe we can think of, well, I will eventually become a better person, but if we understand and if we look to the past and see what we have done, maybe we understand that it's better to bring forward some this actions of becoming better persons. And to improve self-confidence, it's very important as well. If we think of different lives we have, different experiences, of course that the level of balance, self-balance we have today, it's probably because we made some effort before, and this accounts for a lot of important experiences, and it may give us more self-confidence in our own strong traits. If you go to next slide, I'd like to make a quick differentiation between the study of past lives and Xology. When we think of studying past lives, we are just today looking to the past, looking behind. But Xology is a little bit more than looking to the past lives. In the next slide, there's another representation of this, a graphical representation. We are interested not only in understanding what we have done in the past, but we also would like to predict what we are going to do in the future, and actually to guide our efforts towards the right direction, and to the direction that we want for ourselves. Okay, so we're not actually trying to understand or to gain information about ourselves just to become more like, to think that we are more important people today, but instead we want to understand what we have done in the past that was good, that was substantial, what was not substantial, what was bad, and to try to eliminate in our future the bad and the bad things, the mistakes, and to commit new mistakes, and to actually try to commit less, but at least to commit less newer mistakes. Okay, so we want to actually guide our evolutionary process. So we study the past to guide our future. Okay, so this is the basic approach of Xology. And in this process, we also have to think if there are any drawbacks or risks in the study of existential seriality. And if we move to the next slide, please. we're going to see that I just brought 3 of the drawbacks that we may have. One is to damage our self-image. If we have a very, beautiful, pretty self-image today, we can, by studying the past, understand that we could have done things that we don't actually be proud of. We are actually not proud of in the past. So this can actually damage and scratch our self-image. But this is something important. It's very good if we are thinking of becoming more aware of who we are and becoming more evolution. So the other risk is to have a shock of reality by getting in touch with this, and this shock of reality is maybe in the other direction too, the opposite direction. We cannot actually think that we were really bad people in the past, and then we may realize that we did some good things in the past, and it brings to us more responsibility for who we are, for what we are doing today. So this is also an important way of, how can I say, just to balance our self-image and the self-concept that we have today. But the other risk of studying past lives and studying Xology is to alienate oneself from present life. Of course, if we are not willing to do this, that's not the idea. It's to become more aware of who we are and more lucid in our present life. But if we somehow want to study past lives to escape from the reality today, so this can be a risk. But of course, if we don't, how can I say, we're not trying to do this, we're not trying to recommend this, we don't recommend this, and we're not trying to, we're trying to say is not this, we're trying to be even more lucid and more aware of where we are in our evolutionary process today. And I think I'm already past the time here, in 7 minutes, but
yes,
I'll leave the rest of the ideas to the discussion, to the debate.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have one question here from Diane
Okay.
Rossa. So the question is, in your opinion, what do you think is the main difficulty for someone to admit seriality?
I think that the main difficulty, first of all, is not being open to see oneself, to see him or herself as a different person. So it's probably some kind of self-protection, some self-protective, approach or position that the person may have. Because if we admit seriality, we have to change dramatically our, most of the times, our principles, our beliefs, our priorities in this life. So this requires a lot of effort to accommodate all the changes and all the adjustments that need to be done once we admit seriality. So I think it's something that requires, this disposition, personal disposition, personal openness to change. So I think that this is one of the main aspects of, that makes it hard to believe, hard to accept seriality. Of course, there may be different reasons, but I think that this is, in my point of view, is the most important one.
Great. We just have one more question. If you could talk to us a little bit about this importance of retrocognitions in helping us to know about the existential seriality.
Mm-hmm. Well, the retrocognition is one very important phenomenon that we can experience, that we can have, that it's a self persuasive phenomenon and can be considered as a proof to oneself. The one that person that experiences this can take the retrocognition as a proof to the existence of past lives and seriality, existential seriality. And there are different ways of having this experience of promoting retrocognition. There are different techniques. This is something that can be somehow induced by self-research, by immersing ourselves in the topic that we're trying to understand. Actually, self-research, bioenergetic techniques, the study of conscientiology, first of all, to be open to the idea of having different lives is one important thing. Because if you don't consider this as a possibility, even if you have a retrocognition, it won't be considered a retrocognition. So it's very, very important to be open to this. And there are different ways of having, of studying. We can search for, books that talk about the phenomenon in a technical aspect. There's also kind of prepares our brain, our memory to accommodate the experiences if we eventually have one of them. But most important is to have a good intention, to have assistential predisposition while trying to experience retrocognitions. Because if we think of ourselves as separate or independent beings, maybe we can think, well, retrocognition is a phenomenon that I have in my mind, and it's all disconnected from the other persons, all the others. But it is not. We are connected. We are kind of in a network of energetic net that once we start studying past lives and when try to have retrocognitions, it eventually will affect and will, by these connections that we have with other people, it will, kind of touch intra and extra physical consciousnesses. And it's important for us to be open to assisting these consciousness that eventually are advocated during this process. So this assistential intention is very important and is very productive in this whole process. And we can support this by studying bioenergetic techniques, assistential techniques. It's everything that can be used to to help in this process is very very good. It's very good. And cosmetics as well. I think that these are the topics that I would say in my last slide. So if yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. So these are the tools that we have to investigate our own existential series, which is self-research, bioenergetic techniques, cosmetics, inclination and openness to existentiality, and of course, courses, books, self-research, laboratories, research groups, to be in touch with other people that are investigating the same topics, and especially with the same approach is very, very good, very important tool. Okay, I'm not sure if I answered the question. If we have another question, we can explore that a little bit.
Yes, that's it for the questions. So we're pretty much a few minutes until the end. So if you want to just say anything to finalize, to conclude.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone that is watching. I hope I have given you at least a glimpse of what Xology is. There is much more material to be explored. much more experienced teachers in Consecutivus, and this is a very interesting and challenging topic, but it's very compensating. That's not the right word, but it's good. It's a good thing. And I'd like to thank ISIC as well for this opportunity once again. And I would also like to invite you all for the next talk, which is going to be given by Professor Roberto Laime. It's going to be on October the 27th. The Evolution of the Consciousness. Roberto Laime is the coordinator of the CIEC, the Center for Higher Studies of Conscientiology in Foz do Iguaçu. He's also a book writer and investigator of the series Xology. So very, very nice and very good opportunity to exchange ideas with him as well.
Great. So thank you very much, Weber, for your talk today. It was very informative.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you for the invitation.
Great to have you here. So,
okay.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you.